To those of you who are here, thank you for joining me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gail Embt with Mind Club America, and I'm the program director for our Parent Inner Circle. We're here for a conversation about hard talks made easy. They're never easy, but they can be a whole lot easier than what we face on a daily basis. So this is going to be an information-packed evening where I'm going to share some tips and strategies for making hard talks easy. With me tonight on camera, you'll see Jack, my partner and colleague.
Hey, everyone.
Works on the inner circle, and we're both glad to have everybody here. So
Right.
Hard talks made easy. So what I want to do with everyone tonight is a few things. I want to help us all really discover what is one of the most powerful approaches to unlocking new behavior. The skills and approach that I teach and talk about is built on community reinforcement and family training. And for those of you not familiar with it, it is evidence-based. And when it's been looked at, families who engaged in using these skills versus people who only came to a support group meeting or parents who engaged in another approach, this approach is 3 times more effective. Families are so much more powerful in their understanding of behavior and their ability to strengthen the connection with their children and tap into their children's own motivation to make changes, whether it be to stop trying substances or whether they've been using it for years, and finally helping their child to take actual steps out of substance use and addiction. So really, really powerful approach. I know it firsthand for myself and also from hundreds of other families that I've worked with. In this particular talk tonight, which is focusing just on the communication side of things, hard talks made easily, I'm really going to focus on 6 keys to getting through those conversations in ways that strengthen connection, avoid anger, outbursts, aggression, which we sometimes are met with by our kids, and really allow us to share truths with our children and still strengthen the connection. We're going to learn about how to know when it's the best time to talk to our children. Because who hasn't been out there and your child's come home and you're smelling the weed all over them and you start in on how bad that is for them and what it's doing to their life, and where do we get with that? Not very far. If you're like me, I was met with the blank stare, the stone wall, or the angry outburst, the challenging behavior from my child. So we're going to learn how to figure out when the best time is to have talk with our children. And as I was preparing for tonight and really thinking about what I wanted to share with everybody, I really realized there's a hidden roadblock that we don't always think about that's so powerful in preventing us from being able to have the hard talks. And when we address it, is so enabling so that we can really get through these conversations. So we're going to talk about the hidden roadblock and what that is. So this was me whenever I had to have a hard talk with my child about substance use, addiction, how they were doing in school, how they were doing at work, what was happening with them. I have 2 kids, 2 children. They're young adults now. And when I realized that they were falling off the path I thought they were on with drugs and alcohol, I found myself in a completely foreign land. I had no idea what was going on. And I started being, having therapists and school counselors and then police and EMTs and ICU doctors and treatment programs. And I was drowning in this world that I didn't understand. And I was trying to talk to my children, and all I was getting was arguing and blaming and mistrust and avoidance. And then I tried to get advice, and I was drowning in advice. The first people to give advice were the relatives. Generally not helpful because they really didn't understand what it was like trying to engage with my children. And I had the books and the websites and the classes and the 12-step programs and the smart recovery training and more. And my head was just awash in information, but I still wasn't able to do anything even as simple as having a straightforward conversation with my children. And I had an aha moment when I realized how I was going to be able to turn all this expert guidance that was around me. I'd managed to find a lot of expert information, but how was I going to turn it into my personal plan that I was going to use with my children? And really one of the keys to unlocking that was I found someone who became my coach, my mentor, and my support. She was a parent who'd been in my shoes, and she understood what I needed to find my path out of this foreign land that I was lost in. And one day I tried something new. Instead of telling my son that vaping was wrong and bad and pulling out all the science, we were on the porch and we were kind of relaxing together. And he loved to play baseball, so he and I were just kind of tossing a baseball back and forth again. And I screwed my courage to the sticking point and I said, "Can I ask you a question? When you vape, what is it that you like about it? What do you get from doing this?" And then I was quiet and I listened to what he said to me. And I said, "So what you're telling me is that part of why you like vaping is because you get this real immediate hit of stimulation and you feel kind of alive and connected. And the other thing you really like about vaping is it's an excuse to hang with your friends." And I didn't say anything else. I didn't go into my usual lecturing. I just let it sit there. And then I tried something else new. And because he had seemed to be relaxed and we were still tossing the ball back and forth, he hadn't stormed off the porch. He was still there, still willing to talk. I said, "Are there any things that you don't like so much about vaping?" And because he was relaxed and because I'd listened to him, he told me. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head, that when I did something new and different, I got a different response from him. I got different behavior. He remained connected and we started able to talk. And that's all I needed for me to buy into making changes and to buy into the approach that I now teach. I rolled up my sleeves and I learned new ways to communicate. We're going to talk about a lot of those tonight. I learned how to set limits and boundaries, not something we're going to cover so much tonight, but that we cover in the workshops that I teach. I learned how to reward my children for change in a good way and not be, enabling. I hate that word, but it's a shorthand. A lot of people have a direct reaction when I say enabling. I don't like it, but it's that feeling we have that the things we're doing for our children are not actually helping them quit their substance use. That's all it is. And I also realized as I worked through this that the barriers, some really powerful barriers existed inside me that I needed to work on, and I got help working on them, and it was transformative. My reward is that my boys who wouldn't talk to me, didn't want to be in the same room with me, swore they would never have anything to do with me ever again as soon as they got out of the house, both now talk to me. They consult with me. They share things that are working and not working. They've made significant progress. One of them is completely drug-free and the other one is really working on it. That's the reward I've gotten, to see them take control over their lives, have us restore the trust that had been so badly broken and the communication that had been non-existent. That's why this is so powerful for me, that what I teach, what I believe in. And it comes down to, again, as I was preparing for tonight, I came down to a bunch of questions that I asked myself before I started on this journey. The questions I asked myself were, is what I'm doing now getting me the change I want from my child? Can I continue to do this alone? Do I see my path to ending their substance use clearly? Do I see how I'm going to help them get out of substance use? Am I happy with this trial and error method of reading books and getting advice and trying something, and then it works, it doesn't work, I have to figure out a different approach? Is my trial and error approach to strengthening connection and motivation working? Am I confident that I'm doing the best I can to help my child? My answer to these questions was no, 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 and no. Now, my answer to these questions is yes, I am. No, I'm not ever going to go through doing this alone again. Yes, I see a path. Yes, I think I'm doing a good job. And yes, I'm confident that I'm doing the best I can to help my child. Think about these questions for yourselves. They're a great way to figure out whether what you're doing is working and you're happy with it, or whether you want to think about trying to change how you interact with your children. And it's what got me from my crazed brain to my calm and confident self that I am now, and helped me to set up the Parent Inner Circle and our mission to help other families cultivate calm and confident connections. so that and learn how to motivate your children so they unlock their own reasons for walking away from substance use. With that, I'm going to jump right in and let's talk about the specifics tonight, which are having hard conversations and making them easier for us to have. So the first thing is, why are they so hard? Why is it so difficult to talk about substance use or addiction? Or maybe it's talking about driving while under the influence. Or maybe it's talking about going to that party and saying no to the edibles that are being passed around. Or the friend who's the one who introduces you to the cocaine and the weed and the heroin at the parties. Is it because we're nervous to bring up the topic, afraid of what might happen? Are we concerned that we're going to lose their love? Are we maybe feeling some guilt over, well, maybe we're doing something wrong as a parent that our children feel they want to try these things, or they feel they have to continue to engage in drugs? And a lot of people, myself included, are scared about the response, anger outbursts from our children when we try to touch on these subjects, or even aggressive physical responses from our children. These are the things that make these conversations hard. Tip number one is thinking about when's the right time to engage our child. When I think about that, and I want you to think about that, there are sort of three things to think about: emotional regulation, location, and duration. Emotional regulation, parents who know me know I talk about the bell curve. And there's the bell curve of emotions, right? And out here, we're regulated and we're calm. And if something upsets us or knocks us off balance, we start to get upset. And we get more and more and more and more upset. We get angry. We may get physical. We may get out of control. And then at some point, we come down and we start to get more in control. We start to get connected back to our brain and we get back to calm emotions. The time for learning is when we're here. It's never when we're in the middle of the curve. And the time for teaching, coaching, talking to our children is when we are on either side of the emotional curve. When our child's just walked in the door smelling of weed is not the time to have a conversation with them, because they're not emotionally regulated, they're under the influence, and we're probably not emotionally regulated because we're upset and anxious. The second thing to think about is location. You don't want to do it in the front hall of the school when you've been called to pick up your child, right? You don't want to do it in a place they're going to be uncomfortable. You want it to be somewhere quiet, calming for you and for them. And you don't want them to be rushed, stressed, anxious. I'm running out the door, but I've got to get this point across to you right now. How many times do we in our busy lives make the mistake of we're rushed and in a time deadline and we're going to start this conversation with our child because we think it's the only opportunity we have. Grab them while they're hot, right? No. And duration. I tell you, it is so freeing for our children if we say, I'm going to take 10 minutes for this conversation. I can't tell you the number of times my kids said, Mom, you're going on and on and on and on. Can you make it quick? Set a duration for this conversation. So as we think about the emotional temperature, are they calm? Are they regulated? Are we calm and regulated when we have the conversation? Where are we having this? And we're going to keep it to a certain length of time. And it may be if they say no, that we then say, okay, we're not going to talk about it now, but we're going to talk about it later. And you get them into a time when you're going to have that conversation, because then they have time to get ready for it and to prepare for it. So before jumping into the conversation, check that they're not under the influence, stressed, that you don't have a deadline to meet. And take a different approach. Instead of saying, we have to talk now, try when you and I are both calm, we're going to go into the kitchen where it's quiet, and we'll spend no more than 20 minutes talking about your missing curfew last night. Your child knows that you're regulated. They know they're going to get out of there in less than 20 minutes. They know what the topic is. And they can choose to have the conversation now or to say, can we do it a little bit later? And then you say, yeah, we'll do it after dinner or whatever. All right. So tip number one, pick your time. Really important. Tip number two, for this difficult conversation, make it clear and simple goal. What do you want to talk about in this conversation, and what are you trying to accomplish? And I love this little picture of a castle. It's a Lego castle that somebody's obviously built, putting all the Lego pieces together. Sitting somebody down to say, I want you to stop using marijuana, or you've got to stay in treatment, or you've got to get off heroin. That's a castle. That's actually not a clear, simple goal. It seems like a simple goal to us. Just stop using, stop experimenting, just say no. But the reality is that the castle is made up of individual bricks. Bricks that are the foundation, bricks that are the walls, bricks that are the parapet. And when I talk about the tip for hard conversations being clear, simple goals, I'm talking about the brick, not the castle. What do I mean by that? Break down the castle into bite-sized pieces and tackle a piece at a time. So instead of saying stop vaping in the house, which is a big castle, break down the concern. So stop drinking when you're out with friends and driving home drunk. That's actually a castle made up of bricks. Drinking with friends, going to a bar, driving home after drinking, coming home into the house drunk, coming into the house at all hours of the night, risking the car being in an accident, risking hurting yourself or someone else, and there's others. Each of these is a brick. It's a smaller component of the whole thing that you want, but to make the hard talk easy, you want to pick one brick and focus on that so that it's measurable, it's clear, you know whether it happened or not. Your child can get their head around, oh, they're not making me give up everything that I've got 9,000 reasons to want to do. They're asking me to change one thing. So instead of doing something in response to the concern about drinking when you're out with friends and driving home drunk, and this is a real scenario that a parent faced, and the parent would try to say, well, don't drink while you're out, and that didn't work. Well, don't drive home drunk. Well, that didn't work. They broke it down, and instead of trying that, they said, I'm concerned about you in the car being in an accident. So they picked one brick. I'm most concerned about you being in the driver's seat, but I know you need the car for school and activities. But the car needs to be home by 10 p.m. And if you want to go out, you can. You just can't take our car. If the car's home by 10, you get to use it the next day. If you get it back late, it goes away for 2 days. Now, this family finally found that they would tackle one brick, making sure that he wasn't risking the car being in an accident. And you know what happened? The young man came home by 10 p.m., left the car. Now, he still went out. He still drank too much. There was still a lot of other things to work on, but the parents had managed the first brick of taking the castle. So clear, simple goals will make hard talks easier. The next tip for making hard talks easier is come at the conversation from a place of curiosity and learning. Way too often, I came at my conversations from, I'm going to tell you what you're doing wrong, and I'm going to share all of the research and science and wisdom that I have gained in all of my years with you to make you stop. Anybody think that went over well? No. But when I changed it up, my example of my son on the porch, tossing the baseball back and forth, asking him the question, what is it that you like about vaping? He answered me. And when I repeated it, I showed him that I had heard him. So what was I doing there? I was using something called an open-ended question. It's a question that really can't be answered by yes or no. In many cases, it assumes some behaviors that maybe we don't talk about, but we all know exist. And it's designed to give them a place to share why they're doing the things they're doing. So instead of how can you believe smoking weed every day is a good idea? You said that smoking every day helps you feel calm before school. Did I understand you correctly? What other things might help you feel calmer? So what I'm doing in this conversation is I'm not confronting my child. I'm asking, I'm replaying back to them what they said to me. And then I'm asking if there might be other ways to address the reason they're drinking or using drugs. Another example of this, there's an acronym for it, actually. It's called OARS, rowing your oars, get in the boat, row. Open-ended question. So what is holding you back from doing college applications? Affirm what they said, which is what I showed you in the previous example. I heard you say how much you hate how much time applications take. You'd rather play video games. Is that correct? Then reflect. It sounds like you want to get the applications done, but maybe not spend so much time on them. And you still want to have time to play video games. And then you summarize with an opportunity to move forward. Would you be willing to pick some half-hour blocks to dedicate to doing your applications and then half-hour time for gaming? That might help you get both the applications done and allow you to continue playing your games. How does that sound? I've completely changed the interaction with my child. I'm coming at it from a place of support and acknowledging what they want to do with what they are supposed to be doing and asking them to think about other ways to meet their objectives. So curiosity and openness, tip number 3, ORs. Now, another challenge that we have with our kids is providing feedback. You know, our kids do not want to hear that we don't like what they're doing. So how can we do that without triggering the anger and the reactiveness and the blocking that our kids do? Well, there's an approach which goes by the acronym Pious. I'm going to use an example of a teenage girl who missed her 11:30 p.m. curfew by 30 minutes. Her parents plan to take her car keys away for 48 hours as a consequence, and they choose to use Pious to communicate that decision. Why? Because it's more effective than the way we might have otherwise said it. Like, I can't believe you weren't home on time. You know you're supposed to be in by 11:30 and you were not home by 11:30. And I was so upset because I was pacing the halls wondering if you were lying in a ditch dead. And I can't believe that you would put me through all of that. So in that case, I'm just going to take your car keys away and you will never get them again until I decide that you have grown up enough to be responsible. Yeah, doesn't work. So how else could we have the same conversation and achieve the goals that we want? Make it clear that curfew is required, that there's a consequence for missing curfew. Positive focus, P. Phrase things in terms of what you want to have happen instead of what you don't want to happen or what didn't happen, or going on and on and on like I just did in my example. Using I statements, I need, I have to have, I am concerned, I wish. These things put the focus on us and what we're asking from the people around us, not blaming our child, not forcing our child to change, telling our child what we need and want, and that it's okay for us to stand up and say what's important for us. Be understanding. This one's a hard one when we're upset, but why is it so important? Our children, we see them as our children, and we'll see them as our children when they're 50 and 60 years old. But they see themselves as independent adults. And if they're in their teenage years, they're going through all the life changes where they're supposed to separate from us. They're supposed to become independent. They've got everybody around them. They've got everybody in their phone telling them that they should make their own decisions and they should be an independent. Be a man, be a woman, make your own decisions. Don't do what your parents tell you to do. So they're in this place where they want to be an adult. And even though we know they're not, and even though we don't think they're right, telling them that is only going to do what? They get defensive and shut down. And you know the first thing to shut down? The ears, closely followed by the brain, and they detach. Correct. So although in the moment it may feel really good for us to vent all this stuff that we think, it's not going to get us a calm conversation. It's not going to make that hard talk any easier. And it's certainly not going to set us up to have another hard talk. How about if we try something different? Acknowledge that they have their perspective and that it's different from ours. And I want to be clear on this. Acknowledging what they say and what they think and what they believe is not the same thing as agreeing. It's really easy to get that confused, but it's very possible to say, I know you believe that smoking weed is good for you. And right now, I don't feel the same way. And so we're going to have to work on this, or we're going to be doing things differently. I don't have to agree with them, but I can understand what they're saying. And if I don't understand why they're saying this, the best thing I can do is go back to the previous tip of be curious and ask, what is it that leads you to feel this way? What makes you say this? What are you getting out of this? Why is this important to you? So be understanding. And another thing that's really powerful is when we can share some of the responsibility. And that doesn't mean we say it's our fault that you didn't get home in time for curfew. Maybe we weren't clear about what the boundary was going to be. Maybe we had stated a boundary before, but we hadn't ever enforced it. Maybe we had backed off when we tried to enforce it. And so they kind of got the idea that they could just slide and it didn't really matter. And I'm sure some of us have had that problem. So demonstrate understanding. All right, let's give you an example of this. Coming back to the daughter who missed curfew by half an hour. Parent, I want to talk to you about last night. I know you will really enjoy having the freedom to use the car, and I trust you value it too. I noticed you came in around midnight, which is after your curfew. I understand it can be hard to manage sometimes, especially if you're having fun or caught up in something important. We're offering her an opportunity to share why she was late. Not going to change anything necessarily, but we want to know what is getting between her and doing what she's expected to do. But it's important that we stick to the curfew because I want you to be safe and rested. I was just 30 minutes late. Nothing happened. Why are you taking the car away from that? By the way, if I do a good imitation, it's probably because I'm just replaying what my kids have said to me at some point in the past. I hear you. It's frustrating when it seems like something small leads to a consequence. But I want you to understand that the curfew is not just about that one night. It's about trust and safety. And I've decided to hold on to the car keys for 48 hours, not to punish you, but to make sure that we're both confident that when there are rules, they are being followed. I got to the same result. Car keys went away for 48 hours. I enforced the curfew. I got some pushback, but I didn't get the anger and I didn't get the aggression. And I was able to be heard. Why? Back to my tip, I'd picked the location and the time and the emotional regulation when I had the conversation. So I didn't do it at midnight when I was tired and stressed and she'd just come in the door from whatever she'd been doing with her friends. I probably either didn't talk to her, let her go to bed, and then I talked with her the next day using my skills, right? All right, tip number 5, affirm autonomy. Put yourself in your child's place and try to see things from their perspective. It is eye-opening. It helps you to build trust because they feel heard, and it reduces their defensiveness, things we run into all the times when we try to have a hard conversation with our child. So this one's pretty straightforward. Only an idiot would think I'm okay with my money being taken, right? That's total yes, but that's not going to get me to the goal. How about if instead we say, I can see it was easy to help yourself to the money when you needed it. I'm not talking about whether it's right or wrong, by the way. I'm just saying I could see it was probably easy to take. It was there and available. I'm going to keep my wallet locked in the safe from now on. So I take action so that easiness goes away. And then I set up an opportunity because they needed money. If you need money, you can do a chore around the house to earn it, or you can find work outside the house. I'm treating them like a human being, an adult. You have choices. You need money. I understand you need money. I might make an opportunity for you to earn some money, or you can get money outside of the house, but you're not going to get it by taking it out of my wallet. Affirm their autonomy. And tip number 6, this is the one that I really have most recently focused on, and yet it has such an impact. And I see it with all of my families. And looking back at myself, it was a game changer for me in my ability to connect with my children. And those were taking a look at my internal barriers. We all have history, we all have life experience, and we've all been shaped by that. And sometimes our experiences have included trauma. They may have had prior experience with challenges, and we may have negative expectations because the last 5 times we tried to go over this with our child, it didn't work. And so we're already tense and we're already expecting it to be hard. And our kids pick up on that. And we betray ourselves in the words we use, the approach we take. We rush into things, we don't think it through. And then we find ourselves getting into a power struggle. You did this. No, I didn't. I saw this. No, I didn't, with our kids. In my case, I had some stuff in my background that had just left me really fearful of certain things. And somehow my children keyed into that. And so that was the threat that they used whenever we got into a conflict or a discussion or they got uncomfortable. They would threaten me with the thing I feared the most. And because I hadn't worked on it, I was terrified and I stopped. I mean, I didn't enforce anything because it was so effective with me, this internal issue that I had. And when I worked through it, when I realized it and I worked through it, it took the power away from them. I was able to then handle when they said this awful thing's going to happen. And I was able to say, well, I would be very sad if that happened. But at the end of the day, it would be your choice. Whereas previously, they'd said this, I would curl up in a ball, literally. It was that tough for me. Do a quick check on your mindset. Are you coming into the conversation expecting a negative outcome? Are you still thinking about the last time a conversation didn't go well? Are you seeing nothing but negative stuff in the future? Instead, try focusing on what you want for the goal for this conversation for the future. And how are you going to be able to get it? I realize we've talked about this before and I've not been good at following through on my part. Who doesn't need to say this around boundaries? I will try and not assume anything until I see you. I'll stop sending so many check-in texts. Because a lot of times when our kids disappear, they go off the grid, they're doing whatever. I've seen it. Many parents have this internal issue. They get worried, scared, nervous, and then they start texting, and the texts come in nonstop to their children's phones, and their children don't respond. And the parent gets more and more wound up and nervous. And there are other ways to handle it, but you don't think of them when you're scared and you're reactive. So, internal barriers. We all have something somewhere. Quick recap. What have I laid out for you tonight? Pick a calm time to make your hard talk easy. Pick a simple goal. Remember, it's the Lego brick. It's not the castle. Take your big castle and break it down and focus on one brick at a time. That's how you build your path to success. Be curious and open. Ask questions. Respect their independence and check yourself for triggers and things that are going inside you. Please go out and use the tools. And please share feedback with me if there's anything I can do to answer your questions or share anything more clearly. This is so important to our ability to help our kids. And it just is transformative for them when they know that the person they love so much is willing to listen to them, able to understand what they're saying, and be there to help guide them and support them as they move forward with their lives. So, thank you, everyone. Good night, all.